A virgin forced to bear kids for a cold, wealthy man. What happened on their first night left her in tears. But as her trembling hand reached for the door, she discovered the terrifying truth. He wasn't trying to control her life. He was desperately trying to save it from the same fate that killed his first fiancée. Have you ever wondered what you'd sacrifice to save someone you love? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. When 19-year-old Aria Martinez walked down the aisle in her grandmother's emerald dress to marry a billionaire stranger, she expected her wedding night to be her worst nightmare. Instead, Dominic Blackwell handed her divorce papers and $2 million, telling her she was free to go. But as her trembling hand reached for the door, she discovered the terrifying truth. He wasn't trying to control her life. He was desperately trying to save it from the same fate that killed his first fiancée. Have you ever wondered what you'd sacrifice to save someone you love? Have you ever felt trapped between protecting your family and protecting yourself? Tonight, we'll witness how a marriage built on lies becomes the only truth that can save two broken souls. But who is the real puppet master pulling the strings? And will they discover his identity before it's too late? Stay with me as we uncover a web of deception that will leave you questioning everyone you trust. Let me take you back to where this deadly game began. The fluorescent hospital lights hummed overhead as Aria Martinez balanced her organic chemistry textbook on her knees, highlighter poised between trembling fingers. Around her, the waiting room buzzed with whispered conversations and the soft beeping of medical equipment. She'd been here every day for 3 weeks, transforming the uncomfortable plastic chair into her makeshift study space, while her father underwent chemotherapy treatments that cost more than most people's annual salaries. At 19, Aria possessed the kind of beauty that turned heads. Long black hair that caught light like silk, warm brown eyes that sparkled with intelligence, and a smile that could melt the coldest heart. But today, dark circles shadowed her eyes, and worry lines creased her normally smooth forehead. The pre-med student who once dreamed of becoming a pediatric surgeon now found herself calculating medical bills instead of molecular structures. Aria, sweetheart. Her mother Elena's voice cracked as she approached, clutching a manila folder that seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. The doctor wants to discuss your father's treatment options. The conversation that followed shattered Aria's world into fragments. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, experimental treatments, costs exceeding $400,000, insurance denials. The family's restaurant chain, once featured in Phoenix magazine as the crown jewel of authentic Mexican cuisine, now hemorrhaging money as Roberto Martinez fought for his life instead of managing his business empire. That evening, Aria sat in their family kitchen, surrounded by bills that painted a portrait of financial devastation. Mortgage notices, medical invoices, loan default warnings. Her parents' voices drifted from the living room, each word cutting deeper than the last. We could lose everything, Elena. The house, the restaurants, my treatment. There has to be another way, Roberto. We can't give up. What if we can't afford the next round of chemo? What if I die and leave you both with nothing but debt? Aria pressed her hands against her ears, but couldn't block out the sound of her mother's quiet sobs. This was the woman who had raised her to believe that education was the path to freedom, that hard work guaranteed success, that family always found a way through dark times. Now that same woman was breaking apart, and Aria felt powerless to stop it. The doorbell rang at exactly 8 o'clock, interrupting her parents' hushed conversation. Through the kitchen window, Aria watched a sleek black Mercedes pull into their driveway. A man in an expensive suit stepped out, tall, confident, carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than her semester's tuition. Marcus Chun introduced himself as a business consultant with a proposition that could solve all their problems. As Aria listened from the kitchen doorway, hidden in the shadows, his words painted a picture that seemed too good to be true. My client is willing to handle all medical expenses, save the restaurants, and ensure your family's financial security. All we need is a simple arrangement. The 34th floor of Blackwell Tower commanded a view of Phoenix that money couldn't buy, because Dominic Blackwell already owned it. At 24, he stood behind floor-to-ceiling windows, steel blue suit perfectly tailored to his lean frame, watching the city spread beneath him like a chessboard where he controlled most of the pieces. His reflection stared back, sharp cheekbones, piercing blue eyes that had earned him the nickname the Ice Prince among business rivals, and an expression that revealed nothing of the storm raging beneath the surface. 3 years had passed since Isabella's death, yet the guilt still consumed him like acid, eating away at whatever capacity for warmth he might have once possessed. The Martinez situation requires immediate attention, Marcus Chun announced, entering the office without knocking, a privilege earned through 5 years of managing Dominic's most sensitive business affairs. The father's condition is deteriorating rapidly. Dominic turned from the window, his movements calculated and precise. What exactly are you proposing, Marcus? A strategic marriage arrangement. 1 year purely business. You handle their debts, gain positive publicity for the company's charitable initiatives, and afterward, everyone walks away satisfied. Marcus placed a folder on the glass desk. The daughter is intelligent, presentable, and desperate enough to agree to reasonable terms. The folder contained photographs and documents about Aria Martinez. Dominic studied her face, young, beautiful, innocent. Everything Isabella had been before the pressure of being engaged to a billionaire had destroyed her. The similarity made his chest tighten with familiar pain. She's just a girl, Marcus. She's 19, legally an adult, and her family needs help you can easily provide. Think of it as charitable investment. Dominic walked to his private bar, pouring himself 2 fingers of scotch he wouldn't drink. The ritual gave him time to think, to push down memories of Isabella's final note. Please don't let another woman suffer because of what I couldn't handle. Promise me you'll never put someone else through this hell. What assurance do I have that she won't be affected by the arrangement? Simple. Make it clear from the beginning that it's temporary. No emotional attachment, no public pressure, no expectations beyond the contract terms. She gets financial security, you get positive press, everyone wins. Marcus made it sound so logical, so clean. But Dominic remembered how logical his engagement to Isabella had seemed initially. A business arrangement that had transformed into genuine love, then morphed into a nightmare of media scrutiny, death threats from business rivals, and psychological torture that had driven the woman he loved to take her own life. His phone buzzed with a text from his head of security. Received 3 more threats this week regarding potential romantic interests. Recommend maintaining distance from public relationships. Set up the meeting, Dominic said finally. But Marcus, if this arrangement causes her any harm, any distress whatsoever, I'll hold you personally responsible. The emerald dress hung in Aria's childhood bedroom like a ghost from happier times. Her grandmother's wedding gown, the only valuable item the Martinez family hadn't sold to pay medical bills, seemed to mock her with its beauty. The silk still shimmered despite being decades old, hand-beaded with tiny pearls that caught the afternoon light streaming through windows she might never see again. Mija, you don't have to do this. Elena Martinez stood in the doorway, her face a battlefield between desperation and maternal protection. We'll find another way. Aria's fingers trembled as she touched the delicate fabric. What other way, Mama? Dad needs that experimental treatment, and we're out of options. Her voice cracked on the last word. Besides, it's only for 1 year. Mr. Chun explained everything. It's just a business contract. But even as she spoke the words, doubt gnawed at her stomach. Something about Marcus Chen's smooth assurances felt rehearsed, like lines from a play she hadn't been given the script for. Why would a billionaire marry a stranger to help her family? What did Dominic Blackwell really want in return? Across town, Dominic stood in his walk-in closet, selecting a tie for his wedding, if the cold arrangement tomorrow could even be called that. His hands moved automatically, muscle memory from thousands of business meetings, but his mind was elsewhere. Isabella's jewelry box sat on his dresser, untouched since her death, containing the engagement ring she'd thrown at him the night before she died. You don't understand what it's like being watched, judged, threatened. Everyone wants something from me because of you." Her final words echoed in his memory as he straightened his platinum cufflinks. Tomorrow, another young woman would enter his world, and he was determined that this time would be different. This time, he'd keep his distance. This time, he'd protect her by setting her free immediately. His phone rang. Marcus again, checking details for the wedding ceremony. Everything's arranged. Small ceremony, minimal guests, very discreet. The girl seems compliant. "Her name is Arya," Dominic corrected sharply. "And make sure she understands this is temporary. Of course. Though I should mention, she's been asking questions about the debt structure. Intelligent girl, very curious about financial details." Something cold settled in Dominic's chest. Isabella had been curious too, asking questions that had led her to discover the threats against her, the manipulation attempts by his business enemies. What kind of questions? Nothing concerning, just thorough. "I've handled it." After ending the call, Dominic stared at Isabella's photograph on his nightstand. Tomorrow, he'd marry a stranger to save her family, then immediately set her free to protect her from his world. It was the only way to honor Isabella's memory while helping someone who needed it. Neither bride nor groom slept that night, both haunted by the feeling that they were stepping into something far more dangerous than a simple business arrangement. The Blackwell Estates ballroom had hosted corporate mergers worth billions, but tonight it felt more like a funeral than a wedding. Arya walked down the aisle in her grandmother's emerald dress, each step echoing against marble floors that reflected her pale face like still water. The handful of guests, mostly Dominic's business associates and a few family friends, watched with the detached interest of spectators at a corporate announcement. Dominic waited at the altar in his signature steel blue suit, jaw set in stone, blue eyes focused somewhere beyond her shoulder. When their hands touched during the ceremony, his were ice cold despite the warm Phoenix evening. The judge's words blended together into meaningless sounds, promises neither of them intended to keep, vows that felt like lies before they were spoken. "You may kiss the bride." The judge's voice seemed to come from underwater. Dominic's lips brushed hers for exactly 3 seconds, long enough to satisfy the legal requirement, brief enough to avoid any suggestion of genuine affection. Arya tasted mint and something bitter, maybe regret. The reception lasted exactly 1 hour. Conversations centered on stock prices and real estate deals while Arya sat beside her new husband, feeling like an actress who'd forgotten her lines. When Marcus Chun approached with champagne and congratulations, his smile seemed too wide, too practiced. "Beautiful ceremony," he told them, raising his glass. "To new beginnings and mutual benefit." Dominic's hand tightened almost imperceptibly around his water glass. Indeed, as the evening wound down, Arya's parents approached to say goodbye. Her father, weakened by chemotherapy but determined to attend his daughter's wedding, embraced her with tears in his eyes. "I'm so sorry, Mija. This should have been the happiest day of your life." "It's okay, Papa. This is how I choose to save our family." But as they walked toward the master bedroom of Dominic's mansion, both newlyweds moved like condemned prisoners approaching their execution. The hallway stretched endlessly, lined with family portraits of Blackwells who had married for love, not survival. Dominic opened the bedroom door, then stepped aside to let Arya enter first. The room was enormous, bigger than her entire apartment near campus, decorated in shades of gray and navy that reflected its owner's cold aesthetic. But what caught her attention was the manila envelope on the bed, thick with official documents. "Sit down," Dominic said quietly, loosening his tie. "Please." Arya perched on the edge of a chair, hands folded in her lap like a schoolgirl called to the principal's office. Dominic moved to his desk, retrieving something from the top drawer, a cashier's check that made her gasp when she saw the amount. $2 million, he said, his voice steady as granite. "Plus the divorce papers. Sign them, take the money, and you're free to go. Tonight if you want." The room spun around her. "I don't understand. Your family's debts are already paid. The restaurant mortgages, your father's medical bills, everything Marcus told you about. This money is yours, no strings attached." He set both items on the bed between them. "I won't touch you. I won't control you. You can leave right now and never see me again. Arya stared at the check, then at the man who had just offered her freedom when she'd expected captivity. Why would you do this? What do you want from me? For the first time since she'd met him, emotion flickered across Dominic's features. Pain, guilt, something that looked almost like fear. I want you to survive what happened to, what I couldn't prevent before. As she reached for the divorce papers with trembling hands, her eyes caught something on his nightstand. A silver-framed photograph of a young woman with dark hair and kind eyes, flowers at its base like a shrine. Who is she? Arya whispered. Dominic's face went white. Someone who should have run when she had the chance. The photograph drew Arya like a magnet. Isabella, the name was etched on a small silver plate below the frame, had been beautiful in the way of women who don't know their own power. Her smile was genuine, unguarded, nothing like the careful expressions Arya had seen in photographs of other billionaire wives. She was your fiancée. It wasn't a question. Dominic turned away, shoulders rigid beneath his expensive shirt. That's not relevant to our arrangement. Our arrangement? Arya's voice sharpened. You mean the marriage you want to end before it begins? She stood, the emerald dress rustling around her legs. Nothing about this makes sense. You could have just paid my father's bills anonymously. Why go through a wedding ceremony? Why involve me at all? Because Marcus said it was the most efficient way to. Marcus suggested this. Something cold crawled up Arya's spine. He told us you requested the marriage specifically, that it was your idea. Dominic's head snapped toward her, blue eyes suddenly alert. What exactly did he tell your family? That you wanted a wife for social appearances, that the arrangement would benefit your company's image and solve our financial problems. Arya moved closer, studying his face. He said you'd interviewed several potential candidates and chosen me. The silence stretched between them like a wire under tension. Dominic's jaw worked as if he were chewing broken glass. Marcus told me your family specifically requested a marriage arrangement, that your father insisted on it to preserve family honor. My father would never. Arya stopped, realization hitting her like ice water. We've been played. That's impossible. Marcus has been my financial advisor for 5 years. He's handled my most sensitive business dealings. Has he? Arya crossed to the window, her mind racing through the evening's conversations. At the reception, he seemed very interested in our compatibility. Asked if we discussed future living arrangements, whether we planned to maintain separate residences. Dominic was quiet for so long that Arya turned to find him staring at Isabella's photograph with an expression of dawning horror. She asked questions too, about the people in my life, my business relationships. She said someone had been calling her, telling her things about my past, about what happened to other women who got too close to me. What kind of things? Threats, warnings, details about business deals that only someone with inside access could know. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I thought it was my enemies trying to use her against me. But what if? The bedroom door opened without a knock. Marcus Chun stood in the doorway, his usual smile replaced by something that looked almost predatory. I hope I'm not interrupting the happy couple's first evening together. Neither Arya nor Dominic spoke, but Marcus's eyes moved between them, calculating and cold. Just wanted to ensure everything was proceeding smoothly. No unexpected complications. Everything's fine, Dominic said carefully. Excellent. Oh, and Arya, your father's treatment schedule has been moved up. He'll need to be at the hospital early tomorrow morning. I've taken the liberty of arranging transportation. After Marcus left, Arya and Dominic stared at each other across the room. The divorce papers lay forgotten on the bed, suddenly less important than the growing certainty that they were both trapped in someone else's carefully constructed web. The Phoenix morning sun blazed through the mansion's windows as Arya descended the marble staircase, still wearing yesterday's emerald dress. She'd spent the night in the guest room, mind churning with questions that multiplied like cancer cells. Dominic waited in the kitchen, already dressed for business, steam rising from 2 untouched coffee cups. Your father's treatment went well, he said without looking up from his phone. I spoke with his oncologist an hour ago. You call my father's doctor? Arya's voice carried surprise, mixed with something that might have been gratitude. "I own the hospital." The statement landed between them like a stone in still water. "I wanted to ensure he received the best possible care." Before Arya could respond, her phone exploded with notifications. Social media alerts, news app pings, text messages from friends she hadn't spoken to in months. The first headline made her stomach drop. "Billionaire's mystery bride. Who is Arya Martinez?" Paparazzi photographs filled her screen. Images of her entering the mansion, close-ups of her face during the ceremony, speculation about her background and motivations. The comments section was brutal. Gold digger, social climber, desperate family using their daughter as currency. How did they get these pictures? Her hands shook as she scrolled through increasingly invasive articles. Dominic's jaw tightened. "I have the best security money can buy. Someone with inside access leaked these." The realization hung between them like poison gas. Marcus Chun had attended the wedding. Marcus Chun had access to guest lists, security schedules, personal information about both families. Arya's phone rang. Her mother, voice thick with tears. "Mija, there are reporters outside our house. They're asking terrible questions about why you married so quickly, whether you're pregnant, if our family forced you into this arrangement. Mama, don't answer any questions. Don't open the door." But that's not the worst part. Elena's voice dropped to a whisper. "Someone called this morning claiming to be from a debt collection agency. They said we still owe money, that the payments weren't complete. They threatened to sue us if we don't pay additional fees." Arya met Dominic's eyes across the kitchen. "That's impossible. The debts were supposed to be cleared." "They were," Dominic said grimly. "I transferred the full amount yesterday." After hanging up, Arya began pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. Marcus arranged the media leaks. He's the only one who benefits from keeping us together, keeping the marriage public. Why would he want that? Because divorced people don't generate ongoing newspaper stories. Unhappy married people do. Arya stopped pacing, pieces clicking together in her mind. Think about it. Every article mentions your company name, your business holdings. Free publicity worth millions. Dominic's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Saw the news coverage. "Excellent exposure for Blackwell Industries. We should schedule more public appearances to maximize the impact." "He's treating our lives like a marketing campaign," Arya breathed. But that afternoon brought worse news. While reviewing financial documents in Dominic's home office, Arya discovered something that made her blood freeze. The debt payments to her family's creditors had been processed through a company called Phoenix Investment Holdings, a shell corporation that, according to public records, was owned by Marcus Chun. "He didn't pay our debts," she told Dominic, voice hollow with shock. "He paid himself." The Blackwell Industries boardroom felt like a courtroom as Dominic faced 12 disapproving faces around the polished mahogany table. News of his sudden marriage had sent company stock tumbling, and the board members wanted answers he couldn't provide without revealing truths that would destroy everything. "Your personal decisions are affecting shareholder confidence," declared Margaret Stevens, the silver-haired board chair who'd known Dominic since childhood. "Marrying a teenager from a failing restaurant family raises questions about your judgment. Arya is 19, legally an adult, and my personal life remains separate from company operations," Dominic replied, each word measured and cold. "Does it?" Board member Richard Walsh slid a tablet across the table. "Social media speculation about your motives is trending worldwide. Some analysts suggest you're having a mental breakdown. Others claim it's a publicity stunt. Either way, it's damaging our reputation." Dominic studied the screen filled with hashtags and memes mocking his marriage. Hashtag billionaire bride, hashtag desperate measures, hashtag Blackwell scandal. Each post felt like a knife wound, not for himself, but for Arya, who was being portrayed as either a victim or a manipulator. Meanwhile, across town, Arya sat in her father's hospital room, watching him sleep peacefully for the first time in months. The experimental treatment was working, his color better, breathing easier. But the victory felt hollow, knowing it was built on lies. "You look troubled, Mija." Roberto's eyes opened, still weak but alert. "Papa, I need to ask you something important. When Marcus Chun first approached our family, what exactly did he say about the marriage arrangement?" Roberto's brow furrowed with effort to remember. He said, "Mr. Blackwell specifically requested you after seeing your photograph and learning about your academic achievements. Said he wanted an intelligent wife who could handle the pressures of his world. But Dominic told me Marcus said we requested the marriage to preserve family honor. That makes no sense. We never suggested marriage. We were discussing loan options when Marcus mentioned his client's interest in you." Roberto struggled to sit up straighter. "Aria, what's happening? Is there something wrong with your husband?" Before she could answer, Marcus Chun appeared in the doorway, carrying flowers and wearing his practiced smile. "How's our patient today?" "Much better, thanks to your arrangement," Roberto said gratefully. "Actually, I have wonderful news. The hospital wants to feature your recovery in their newsletter, a story about community support and generous donors. It will be excellent publicity for everyone involved." Aria's skin crawled. Even her father's illness was becoming part of Marcus's media strategy. That evening, she found Dominic in his study, surrounded by financial documents and empty scotch glasses. "The board wants me to have the marriage annulled," he said without looking up. "They think it will restore confidence in my leadership." "Maybe they're right." "Are they?" You finally met her eyes. "Because every instinct I have says running away will put you in more danger, not less." "What kind of danger?" Dominic held up a printout of bank transactions. "Marcus has been transferring money from my accounts for 3 years. Small amounts, nothing that would trigger automatic alerts, but it adds up to over $2 million. The number hit Aria like ice water. The exact amount you offered me in divorce settlement. He's been planning this for years, Aria. We're not just pawns in his game, we're the end game." Aria's hands trembled as she threw clothes into her college backpack, the same bag she carried to classes just days ago when her biggest worry was passing organic chemistry. Now she was fleeing a marriage that had become a prison, escaping a man who'd offered her freedom only to discover they were both trapped. "You can't just leave." Dominic stood in the doorway of the guest room, his usual composed facade cracking. "Marcus will know something's wrong if you disappear. I don't care what Marcus thinks. My father's treatment is working, our debts are supposedly paid, and you have your divorce papers. I'm going back to my real life." "What real life?" "Your face is on every tabloid in America. Reporters are camped outside your parents' house in your campus apartment. Where exactly do you think you can hide?" Aria zipped the backpack with more force than necessary. "I'll figure it out." But as she reached for the door handle, her phone exploded with incoming calls. Her mother's number flashed on the screen, followed immediately by the hospital's main line. Aria's blood turned to ice as she answered Elena's frantic voice. "Aria, your father collapsed during his morning walk. They're rushing him into emergency surgery. Something went wrong with the treatment. Internal bleeding." The phone slipped from Aria's fingers, clattering to the marble floor. Dominic caught her elbow as her knees buckled. "We're going to the hospital. Now." The drive through Phoenix traffic felt endless. Every red light, a personal insult. Dominic's Maserati ate up miles while Aria sat rigid in the passenger seat, replaying every moment of her father's improvement over the past week. He'd been getting better. The doctors have been optimistic. "This isn't random," she said suddenly. "Marcus arranges for my father to get experimental treatment. Then, conveniently, he has a medical crisis the moment I try to leave." Dominic's knuckles were white against the steering wheel. "That's impossible. Even Marcus couldn't manipulate someone's medical condition. Couldn't he? He's been manipulating everything else." They arrived at the hospital to find Elena pacing the surgical waiting room, rosary beads clutched in her hands. "The doctors won't tell me anything except that he's in surgery. They said something about the medication interactions, that there might have been an error in his treatment protocol." "What kind of error?" Dominic demanded. "They're investigating." "But Aria," Elena's voice broke. "They said if he doesn't respond to the surgery, we might need to consider other options." The words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Aria sank into a plastic chair, that felt exactly like the one she'd occupied during her father's original diagnosis. The chair where she'd made the decision to sacrifice her freedom for his life. Marcus Chun appeared in the waiting room exactly 30 minutes later, carrying coffee and sympathy like well-rehearsed props. I came as soon as I heard. "How is Roberto?" "Still in surgery," Dominic replied, his voice flat as winter steel. "Interesting timing for a medical emergency." "What do you mean by that?" "I mean, my wife was planning to leave town this morning, and suddenly her father needs life-saving surgery." Marcus's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a micro-expression of satisfaction before the mask of concern slid back into place. "Surely you're not suggesting." "I'm not suggesting anything. I am stating facts." Arya looked between the two men, her exhaustion replaced by crystalline clarity. "You did this. Somehow you caused this. That's a serious accusation without evidence. Then prove me wrong. Show us the medical records. Explain how a patient who was improving yesterday is dying today." For the first time since she'd met him, Marcus Chin's smile faltered completely. And in that moment of unguarded expression, Arya saw the truth written across his features like words on a page. Her father's life hung in the balance, and Marcus Chun held the strings. The surgical waiting room became their war room. While Roberto fought for his life behind closed doors, Arya and Dominic formed an unlikely partnership born of desperation and growing trust. They sat side by side on uncomfortable plastic chairs, laptops balanced on their knees, diving deep into Marcus Chin's carefully constructed lies. "Look at this." Arya pointed to bank records displayed on Dominic's screen. "Every transfer Marcus made from your accounts corresponds to a medical billing cycle for my father's treatment. He wasn't just stealing your money. He was using it to control my family's survival." Dominic scrolled through months of financial data, his jaw tightening with each revelation. "The experimental treatment my hospital is providing is not experimental at all. It's a standard protocol that costs a fraction of what Marcus told your family. So he inflated the cost to justify the marriage arrangement. Worse than that," Dominic pulled up another screen. "The medication that caused your father's complications? It's not part of his treatment plan. Someone ordered it separately, and the pharmacy records show Marcus Chin's signature as an authorized representative." Arya's hands clenched into fists. "He poisoned my father to keep us trapped. We can't prove that yet, but we can prove embezzlement, fraud, and medical interference." Dominic's voice carried a cold fury she'd never heard before. "I'm calling the FBI." "Wait." Arya grabbed his wrist. "If we expose him now, what happens to my father's treatment? Marcus has legal authorization to make medical decisions as our family's financial advocate. He could cut off everything." They stared at each other across the laptop screens, the weight of impossible choices crushing down like concrete. Save Roberto immediately and lose the chance to stop Marcus permanently, or gather enough evidence to destroy him while risking Roberto's life. "There's another option," Dominic said slowly. "We make Marcus think he's winning while we gather evidence. Ow! We give him what he wants. A happy married couple generating positive publicity for my company. Public appearances, interviews, social media posts. Let him think we've accepted our roles in his game." Arya felt sick at the thought. "You want us to pretend to be in love? I want us to survive long enough to destroy him." Dominic's blue eyes burned with determination. "But it means staying married, living together, convincing everyone, including Marcus, that this arrangement has become real. For how long? However long it takes." The surgery doors opened, interrupting their strategy session. Roberto's doctor emerged, exhaustion written across his features. "The surgery was successful, but he's critical. The next 72 hours will determine his recovery." Elena collapsed with relief, but Arya felt only cold calculation. 72 hours to convince Marcus they were cooperative while building a case that would end his manipulations forever. "Dr. Stevens," Dominic addressed the surgeon, "I want my wife's father transferred to the VIP wing with private security. No visitors without our explicit approval." "Of course, Mr. Blackwell." As medical staff wheeled Roberto toward recovery, Arya made a decision that felt like jumping off a cliff. Okay, we'll play Marcus's game. But when this is over, I want him destroyed completely. Consider it done. For the first time since their wedding night, they were truly united in purpose. The Phoenix Tribune's front page featured a photograph that made Arya's stomach lurch. Herself and Dominic holding hands outside the hospital, his arm protectively around her shoulders, both looking like grieving newlyweds supporting each other through family crisis. The headline read, "Love in the Time of Crisis. Billionaire and bride united by tragedy." How did they get this picture? Arya demanded, staring at the newspaper over breakfast in Dominic's kitchen. "We were at the hospital for 3 minutes. Marcus." Dominic's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "He called the press before we even arrived." The photograph was just the beginning. By noon, entertainment reporters had descended on Phoenix like locusts, camping outside the Blackwell mansion, the Martinez family home, and the hospital. Social media exploded with hashtags. Hashtag Blackwell love, hashtag crisis couple, hashtag billionaire bride. Arya's college professors were giving interviews about her academic performance. Her high school friends were selling stories about her family's financial struggles. "This is insane." Arya scrolled through hundreds of posts analyzing everything from her facial expressions to her choice of clothing. "They're treating our lives like entertainment." Dominic's phone rang constantly. Reporters, board members, business associates all wanting statements about his sudden marriage and its impact on company operations. Stock prices fluctuated with each news cycle, rising when coverage was positive, dropping when tabloids suggested scandal. "The board is meeting this afternoon," Dominic announced, loosening his tie with visible frustration. "They want to discuss the public relations implications of our relationship." What does that mean? It means they're considering forcing me out as CEO if I don't get the media situation under control. Arya felt the walls closing in from all directions. So Marcus gets what he wants either way. If we stay together, he controls us through the media circus. If we separate, you lose your company and he probably takes over as interim financial advisor. There's something else. Dominic handed her his phone, showing a text message that made her blood freeze. "Enjoying the publicity? Remember, Roberto's continued treatment depends on maintaining positive family relationships. It would be unfortunate if his recovery were interrupted." The message came from an unknown number, but they both knew its source. "He's threatening my father directly now, which means we're getting close to something he can't afford to have exposed." That afternoon, while Dominic faced his hostile board meeting, Arya received an unexpected visitor. A woman in her 50s, elegantly dressed, but with eyes red from recent tears, stood at the mansion's front door. "I'm Catherine Morrison," the woman said. "Isabella's mother." Arya's heart stopped. "I'm sorry, I don't think we should. Please, I know what Marcus Chun is doing to you. He did it to my daughter too." They sat in the mansion's living room, Isabella's mother holding a manila folder that seemed to contain the weight of the world. "Isabella didn't commit suicide because of media pressure," Catherine said quietly. "She killed herself because Marcus showed her photographs of what he claimed were other women who'd been eliminated when they became inconvenient to Dominic's business interests." "That's impossible. Dominic would never." "Of course he wouldn't. The photographs were fake, the stories were lies, but Isabella believed them. Marcus convinced her that staying engaged to Dominic would eventually get her killed, but leaving him would get her family killed." Arya felt the room spinning around her. So she chose. She chose to remove herself from the equation entirely. Marcus drove her to suicide, then positioned himself as Dominic's grief counselor and trusted advisor. Catherine opened the folder, revealing bank statements, recorded phone calls, and private investigator reports. "I've spent 3 years gathering evidence that Marcus Chun is a predator who destroys women to maintain control over wealthy men. You're not his first victim, Arya, but if you're brave enough, you could be his last." 3 weeks of careful investigation had transformed Dominic's home office into a war room. Financial records covered every surface: bank statements, transaction logs, and audit reports that painted a devastating picture of Marcus Chun's betrayal. The man they trusted had been systematically bleeding Dominic's company dry for years, using fake investment schemes and phantom business expenses to fund his gambling addiction. "Look at this." Aria pointed to a highlighted section of documents spread across the mahogany desk. Her accounting skills, developed during her family's financial crisis, had proven invaluable in tracking Marcus's elaborate deceptions. "These payments to Phoenix Development Consulting, the company doesn't exist. It's just a shell account leading directly to several Las Vegas casinos." Dominic studied the evidence, his jaw tightening with controlled rage. $17 million over 4 years. He's been using my company as his personal bank. And my family's restaurant debts? They weren't to legitimate creditors. Aria's voice carried a bitter edge that hadn't been there a month ago. Marcus's manipulation had stolen her innocence, replacing trust with hard-earned wisdom. The money went to underground gambling operations. Marcus created fake debt documents to justify the marriage arrangement. The deeper they dug, the more personal the betrayal became. Marcus hadn't just stolen money. He'd weaponized their deepest fears against them. Phone records showed dozens of calls to Isabella during her final months. Conversations that had planted seeds of paranoia and despair in her already fragile mental state. He convinced her that marrying me would destroy her life, Dominic said quietly, staring at transcripts from Isabella's phone records. Told her about fictional death threats, made up stories about what happened to other women in my life. He drove her to suicide to prevent a wedding that would have complicated his embezzlement scheme. Aria reached across the desk, covering his hand with hers. The gesture was automatic now. 3 weeks of shared investigation had broken down the walls between them, replacing initial distrust with something deeper and more dangerous. "We're going to make him pay for what he did to her. To all of us." Their plan was surgical in its precision. Dominic would feed Marcus false information about transferring assets overseas, making him believe his embezzlement was about to be discovered through normal audit processes. Meanwhile, Aria would approach the FBI with their evidence, using her family's legitimate business reputation to establish credibility. But Marcus was more dangerous than they'd realized. That afternoon, Aria returned home to find her parents' house surrounded by police cars. Roberto Martinez sat on the front steps, his face gray with terror, while paramedics checked Elena's blood pressure. Someone called in a bomb threat, Roberto explained when Aria rushed to his side. Said anyone who helped investigate certain business dealings would face consequences. Marcus's message was clear: back off, or innocent people would suffer. That evening, Dominic made his first public appearance with Aria since their wedding, stepping out of his black Mercedes at Phoenix's most exclusive restaurant. Photographers captured every moment as he helped his wife from the car, his arm protectively around her waist. To the watching world, they looked like newlyweds finally comfortable with their arrangement. In reality, they were declaring war. The fake dinner date became something genuine by the second course. Seated across from each other in the Camelot restaurant, Aria and Dominic found themselves talking about dreams instead of revenge, hopes instead of fear. The investigation had forced them together, but tonight they chose each other's company freely for the first time. "I wanted to save children's lives," Aria said, swirling wine she barely touched. The emerald dress she'd worn to their wedding had been replaced by a simple black outfit that made her look older, more sophisticated. "Pediatric surgery. I used to volunteer at Phoenix Children's Hospital, reading to kids during their recovery." "You could still do that," Dominic replied. "The marriage doesn't have to end your dreams, doesn't it?" She met his eyes directly, and he saw the woman she was becoming, stronger than the frightened girl who'd walked down his aisle. "My life isn't mine anymore. Every decision affects your company, your reputation, your security. What if that changed? What if we made different choices?" The question hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they wanted to cross. 3 weeks of shared meals, late-night strategy sessions, and quiet conversations had created an intimacy neither had expected. Aria had seen Dominic's vulnerability when he talked about Isabella, his guilt over failing to protect someone he loved. Dominic had witnessed Aria's fierce loyalty to her family, her intelligence, her courage in facing down a dangerous enemy. Their hands found each other across the table without conscious thought. Dominic's thumb traced small circles on her palm, a gesture that would have been impossible when they were strangers bound by legal documents. "My father wants to meet with you tomorrow," Arya said softly. "Really meet with you, not as part of some business arrangement. He says he needs to thank the man who saved his life." "I didn't save his life. The doctors. The experimental treatment you paid for save his life. The surgery, the medications, the round-the-clock care." Her voice grew thick with emotion. "He's going to live, Dominic. Because of you." Roberto Martinez had indeed recovered beyond anyone's expectations. The aggressive treatment protocol, available only to patients who could afford its astronomical cost, had beaten back the pancreatic cancer that should have killed him. Elena had called that morning with test results showing no detectable cancer cells, a medical miracle that money had made possible. "There's something else," Arya continued. "I've been thinking about our arrangement, about what happens when this is all over." Before Dominic could respond, his phone buzzed with an urgent message from his head of security. Marcus Chun had been spotted entering the restaurant through the kitchen entrance, bypassing the main security checkpoint. "He's here," Dominic said grimly, scanning the dining room. "He knows we're together." Across the restaurant, a waiter approached their table carrying a silver tray with what appeared to be a dessert course they hadn't ordered. But Arya noticed the man's nervous demeanor, the way his eyes avoided theirs, the slight tremor in his hands. "That's not our waiter," she whispered. The fake waiter was 3 steps away when Dominic recognized him. One of Marcus's gambling associates, a man with violent debts and nothing left to lose. The confrontation erupted faster than either of them could react. The fake waiter lunged forward, not with dessert, but with a syringe filled with something that definitely wasn't insulin. Dominic threw himself sideways, knocking Arya from her chair as the needle barely missed her neck, embedding instead in the leather booth behind them. Restaurant patrons screamed and scattered as security guards rushed toward their table. The attacker fought viciously, desperate in the way of men with nothing left to lose, but he was outnumbered and outmatched. Within minutes, Phoenix police had him in custody while paramedics examined the syringe's contents. "Sedative," the lead detective explained later, as Arya and Dominic gave their statements in the restaurant's private dining room. "Enough to knock someone unconscious for hours. We're treating this as attempted kidnapping." But the real shock came when the attacker broke under interrogation, revealing Marcus's final desperate gambit. Unable to silence them through intimidation, he planned to abduct Arya and hold her until Dominic agreed to transfer $50 million to offshore accounts. The money would have disappeared forever, along with any evidence of Marcus's crimes. "Where's Marcus now?" Dominic demanded. "Unknown. He cleared out his office this afternoon, but we've issued warrants and frozen his accounts. He won't get far. They were wrong." Marcus hadn't run. He'd gone to ground like a cornered animal, and his next move targeted the person Dominic cared about most after Arya. The call came at 2 in the morning. Roberto Martinez's voice was steady despite the circumstances, the voice of a man who'd faced death and emerged stronger. "Dominic, I need you to listen carefully. A man named Marcus Chun is holding Elena and me at our restaurant. He wants to meet with you and Arya in 1 hour, or he says he'll burn the building down with us inside. We're calling the police." "No police. He's watching the building. Says he'll know if anyone else shows up." "Dominic, I know what you've been investigating. Elena and I discussed it. We'd rather die than let this man destroy more lives. But Arya, she loves you, really loves you. Don't let him use that against you." The line went dead. Arya stood in the doorway of Dominic's bedroom, having heard enough of the conversation to understand. She was already dressed, car keys in her hand, prepared to walk into whatever trap Marcus had prepared. "We're not going," Dominic said firmly. "I won't let him use your parents against us." "Then you don't understand me at all." Arya's voice carried steel that reminded him why he'd fallen in love with her. "Those people sacrificed everything for me. I won't abandon them now. This is exactly what he wants, to force us into an impossible choice. Then we don't give him what he wants. We end this, tonight on our terms." She outlined her plan in quick, precise sentences that revealed just how much she'd learned about strategy and survival in the past month. It was risky, dangerous, and absolutely insane. It was also their only chance to save her parents and destroy Marcus forever. As they drove through Phoenix's empty streets toward the confrontation that would determine all their futures, neither spoke about the obvious truth. One or both of them might not survive the night. But they were no longer the frightened strangers who'd married a month ago. They were partners now, in every sense that mattered. The Martinez family restaurant sat dark and empty in the pre-dawn hours, its cheerful murals and colorful decorations transformed into something ominous by shadows and silence. Marcus had chosen his battlefield well, the place where Aria's family had built their dreams, now the stage for their potential destruction. Dominic parked across the street, engine idling as they studied the building for signs of movement. Every window was dark except the kitchen, where a single light burned like a beacon of hope or a funeral candle. "Remember the plan?" Aria whispered, checking the recording device hidden in her jacket. "Get him talking. Make him confess everything while the FBI listens. And if something goes wrong..." She kissed him then, quick and fierce, tasting like determination and goodbye. "Then at least we tried to do the right thing." They entered through the front door, which Marcus had left unlocked. The familiar sense of cumin and fresh tortillas were overwhelmed by the chemical smell of gasoline. Marcus's insurance policy against betrayal. Elena and Roberto sat tied to chairs in the center of the dining room, alive but terrified, duct tape across their mouths. Marcus emerged from the kitchen, no longer bothering with his polished businessman facade. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his usually perfect hair disheveled, and his eyes carried the manic gleam of a man with nothing left to lose. "The happy couple arrives," he said, raising a gun that looked obscenely large in the cozy restaurant. "I was beginning to think you didn't care about family values." "Let them go, Marcus. Your problem is with us." "My problem," Marcus laughed bitterly, "is that you two couldn't leave well enough alone. I had a perfect system, small withdrawals, careful investments, everyone happy. Then you had to play detective." "You mean you had a perfect theft?" Aria corrected, activating the recording device. $17 million stolen from Dominic's company to pay your gambling debts. Gambling? Marcus's voice rose to a near shriek. "I was investing, building opportunities, making connections that would have benefited everyone." "Is that what you told Isabella before you drove her to suicide?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. His face contorted with rage and something that might have been shame. Isabella was weak, couldn't handle the pressure of being useful. Useful? Dominic stepped forward, his own control barely maintained. She was a human being, not a business asset. Everyone's a business asset if you're smart enough to see the angles. Your precious Isabella, Aria's dying father, even you, Dominic, just pieces on a board. Marcus gestured wildly with the gun, and in that moment of distraction, Roberto Martinez did something extraordinary. Despite being bound and weakened by months of cancer treatment, he threw himself sideways, knocking over his chair and creating the chaos Aria and Dominic needed. The recording device captured everything. Marcus's confessions, his threats, his admission of driving Isabella to suicide. But more importantly, it captured the sound of FBI agents breaching the restaurant's back entrance, having traced the device's signal exactly as planned. Marcus spun toward the sound, gun raised, but Dominic was already moving. The tackle sent both men crashing into a display case filled with family photographs, glass exploding around them as they fought for control of the weapon. The gun fired once, the sound deafening in the enclosed space, and then FBI agents swarmed the restaurant. When the chaos settled, Marcus Chun lay unconscious, bleeding from cuts sustained in his fall through the display case. The bullet had lodged harmlessly in the ceiling, and no one else was injured. Justice, when it finally came, was swift and comprehensive. 6 months later, Aria Martinez Blackwell stood in the surgical prep room at Phoenix Children's Hospital, scrubbing her hands with methodical precision. The green scrubs felt more natural than any designer dress, and the familiar weight of responsibility settled around her shoulders like a comfortable blanket. Through the window, she could see Dominic in the waiting area, reading to a group of young patients while their parents attended a support group meeting. He'd funded the hospital's new pediatric wing, but more importantly, he kept his promise to help Arya pursue her dreams on her own terms. Medical school had resumed in the fall, but with a difference. Instead of struggling to balance tuition payments with family obligations, Arya could focus entirely on her studies. The Blackwell Foundation's scholarship program ensured that financial constraints would never again force a promising student to abandon their calling. Ready, Dr. Martinez Blackwell? The attending surgeon smiled as Arya joined the surgical team. Using both names had been her choice, honoring her family while embracing the partnership that had transformed two broken people into something stronger than either could have been alone. The surgery was routine by medical standards, appendix removal on a 7-year-old boy. But Arya approached it with the reverence of someone who understood that every life saved was a victory against chaos and cruelty. Marcus Chin's trial had taught her that evil often wore familiar faces, but had also shown her that love could emerge from the most unlikely circumstances. Roberto Martinez was in full remission. His energy returned to the point where he'd reopened 2 of the family restaurants. Elena had become something of a celebrity in Phoenix's Latino community, speaking at events about perseverance and family strength. Neither parent mentioned the marriage arrangement anymore. They'd seen their daughter's face when she looked at her husband, and that was explanation enough. After the surgery, Arya found Dominic in the hospital cafeteria, sharing pizza with the same children he'd been reading to earlier. The sight made her heart catch in her throat. This powerful man who'd once terrified business rivals, now listening with absolute attention to an 8-year-old's explanation of her favorite cartoon. "How did it go?" he asked when she joined them. "Perfect. Clean surgery. Full recovery expected." She kissed his cheek, earning giggles from their young audience. "How's the story hour going?" "Tommy here was just telling me about his plans to become a superhero when he grows up. I'm gonna say people like you guys saved each other," Tommy announced proudly, missing sauce smearing his chin. Arya and Dominic exchanged glances over the children's heads, both thinking the same thing. Sometimes the most important rescues happen when 2 people choose to save each other. Their love story had begun with deception and desperation, but it had evolved into something rare and precious. A partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and the hard-won understanding that real love meant choosing each other every day, not just in the dramatic moments, but in the quiet ones too. As they walked through the hospital corridors toward home, Arya reflected on how much had changed since that terrifying wedding night. The frightened girl in the emerald dress had become a confident woman preparing to save lives. The frozen prince had learned to love again without fear. What did you think of Arya and Dominic's journey from strangers bound by desperation to partners united by choice? Subscribe for more incredible stories about love emerging from the most unexpected circumstances. And let me know in the comments which moment affected you most. The dramatic confrontation with Marcus, or the quiet scenes where 2 damaged people learned to trust again.